Hello, everyone. I'll give you a second to get connected. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1112th New Social Environment. I'm Magley, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Brooke Kamin Rapaport and Lilly Wei on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the public art program at Madison Square Park Conservancy. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Since 2013, Brooke Kamin Rapaport has been responsible for the Conservancy's program of commissioned public art by contemporary artists in her role as artistic director and Martin Friedman chief curator. While at MSPC, she served as commissioner and curator of the United States Pavilion at the Venice Biennale with the exhibition Martin Puryear Liberty. In 2022, she was awarded an honorary degree from Amherst. And our host today, New York-based independent curator, writer, journalist, and critic Lilly Wei, writes on global contemporary art and emerging art and artists, reporting frequently on international exhibitions and biennials. She has written for dozens of publications here and abroad and is a longtime contributor to Art in America and a contributing editor of Art News. And now I will pass it over to Lilly to get us started.
Thank you, Magley. Welcome, everyone, and welcome, Brooke. This is a significant year for Madison Square Park Conservancy as it celebrates its 20th anniversary, as Magley mentioned. And you became Madison Square Park's director and chief curator in 2013. So you've been with the program for half of its existence. Now, I know you've prepared an overview of the programming from the beginning to the present. So let's jump in and take a look. And I'm sure that many of you have seen these shows. It's such a terrific location. I'm sure all of you know, but it's at 23rd and 5th and Broadway, one of the crossroads of the city. And I think of it as a kind of boutique park. I'd say it's just the right size, not too big, not too small, the Goldilocks zone, right? And before we start the scrolling, perhaps Brooke, just a brief comment on how it all started.
Sure. Thanks so much, Lilly and Magley. Hi, everyone. Such an honor to be here. I think that these new social environment series were so important to all of us, especially during the darkest days of the pandemic. It was a place for exchange and community, analysis and critical understanding of works of art. So it's thrilling to join the group of those who have presented. I think this is the 1112th program, so maybe that's going to be a lucky number for all of us today. Madison Square Park Conservancy's public art program, it was launched, as Lilly said, in 2004, and it began with great agency and also with dreams from the start. And those really came from Debbie Landau, Bill Lukashak, and Danny Meyer. They were the founders in 2003 of Madison Square Park Conservancy. And following on, the great late museum director from the Walker Art Center, Martin Friedman, became the muse for the program. And conversations were held regularly also with Adam Weinberg, David Berliner, and others. And they were the foundations of the ideas for a public art program in a 6.2 acre park. So let's have the first slide. The program began with a project by Marc de Souvero, and that officially launched the exhibition series. Since that time, there have been works by Sol LeWitt, which I think is our next slide, and also Ursula von Reidingsvard. These were the earliest years of the art program. And these were projects by art world titans whose work had been tested in public space. That's something significant to note, because more recently we've brought on artists who are realizing projects in Madison Square Park, and it's their first time that they have had creative work outdoors in public space. That's testing their practice in new ways. So the first projects in the park were largely non-representational, and that became the foundation for the program, and it was a platform of strength on which to build. Since that time, we've commissioned work by Diana Al-Hadid, by Martin Puryear, Teresita Fernandez, Leonardo Drew, Hugh Hayden, Arlene Sheket, Shazia Sikander, and many others. So let's go on to the next slides. I wanted to share a number of examples of the past projects to sort of give context to the type of work that's been on view in the park. Over the last 20 years, there have been light-based projects like this piece by Rafael Lozano Hemmer, Jim Campbell, Leo Villarreal, Yvonne Navarro's water towers, which were embedded with light, and Paula Hayes's gazing globes, and then Erwin Reddle's project of 2017 called Whiteout. There have also been commissions of work based on the figure, like Anthony Gormley in 2010, Alison Sarr, 2011, Jaume Plensa, same year, and Diana Al-Hadid's Delirious Matter. More recently, this year, Rose Simpson was commissioned for a project, 7 towering sentinels that were on view in Madison Square Park on the left and Inwood Hill Park on the right. We've also had sound and video works, Bill Fontana, William Wegman, Oli Alialina and Dragon Espenshede, Ernie Gare, his first outdoor project, Shannon Plum in 2009, Kota Ozawa, 2011, Jaco Olivier, also 2011. The film and video and sound works were largely organized by John Handhart, the film and video curator who sat on the Conservancy's art committee in the early years. Charles Long, a sound piece. And then there have been performance works by Bill Byrne. Josiah McElhenney brought poets, dancers, and musicians to Madison Square Park, using his works as platforms for cultural communication and involvement. And more recently, Magda Campos Pons, across 2 days in September of this year, we came together, going from Harlem Art Park to Madison Square Park, with 100+ people in procession of angels for radical love and unity. There have been projects based on nature, like Roxy Payne's work in 2007, Giuseppe Panone's Ideas of Stone, Teresita Fernandez's Fata Morgana. Christina Iglesias created 5 bronze pools that were installed along the oval lawn, around the oval lawn of Madison Square Park, and that was to summon the ancient Cedar Creek that still flows underneath Madison Square Park, but's hidden. So she daylighted this creek that had been covered over in the name of progress and development in our city. We've also worked with artists who test their materials in public space. Often artists like Orly Ganger, who she created this project in painted rope. Sheila Pepe crocheted thousands of yards of different materials that were able to withstand the outdoors in her project last year called My Neighbor's Garden. And this year, Ana Maria Hernando kicked off the 20th anniversary. Next slide, please. With a piece called To Let the Sky Know, Dejar que el cielo sepa. And this work, Ana made sumptuous clouds and a waterfall out of tulle, the gauzy fabric that we think of as brides wearing for a veil or ballerinas wearing. I wanted to share, to go in depth on a number of our projects, but I wanted to say a few things before that. Commissioning a work for a public site like Madison Square Park, as Lilly said, a small site in New York City, it is 6.2 acres. In New York, it's considered an expansive oasis. In Des Moines, that would be a postage stamp. But every day in this park, there are 60,000 people who traverse the site. That's the population of White Plains, New York, who are in Madison Square Park every single day. Some of those people come to see the works on view and to experience them with great deliberation and on purpose. Others see these projects through happenstance. They come upon a work and they can be inspired, provoked, challenged, surprised. And I think that that's the glory of publicness, and that's what inspires artists to want to bring their work outdoors into a civic public space in New York City, like Madison Square Park. So if we can commission artists who are just on the edge of their greatness, on the edge of their extraordinary power, then hopefully this commission, this project in the park can advance their work, their materials, the scale, their practices, and bring that to a new level. Lilly, do you have questions so far, or should I just keep going?
I think, are you going to the end? Because I think what we do is run through this, and then we'll go to the I'll mention that we're going to the 4 projects that that you will be talking about in greater depth. So let's proceed.
Okay. These are the 4 works that I wanted to go into to some depth on.
Oh, so that's what you, okay. I said, all right. Yeah, because I asked you, I think are you doing them in chronological order? Anyway, but yeah, go ahead. So do that.
Okay. So overall, projects in the park are experiments. Until each work is installed and within the grasp of the public, neither the artist nor the curator nor the public ultimately knows what the work will be. This is a messy process because the artist work is literally constructed in full sight of people. It's a very different curatorial experience and certainly different for the artist experience when they create install work in a museum or an art gallery. In those examples, you can close the door, pull the curtain, and work to create perfection. Here, everything is on view in public sight. People see how a work is constructed. There are cranes, there are riggers. So the building process is very much a part of the installation period with every project that we commission. We hear from the public loud and clear their perspective and their questions and ideas, thoughts, interpretations of the work pretty immediately during the installation. People often gather around fences or barricades while we're installing to voice opinion. People send in emails to Madison Square Park Conservancy, and they also post on social media. These are ways that we are fascinated by and learn from public interpretation and interest in what's on view in the park. And we should also mention that every project is temporary. It's on view for between 4 months to 6 months, and then a next project is installed. So we commissioned Martin Puryear to create a new work, Big Bling, in 2016. This was, of course, the greatest honor to have Martin take a form that had engaged him really since the 1980s in drawings, sculpture, and to consider that for Madison Square Park. Martin's visual language is committed to using materials that are enduring. And for Big Bling, it was a transformation in many ways, because this was a temporary work made with temporary materials, laminated plywood and chain link fence. Next slide. Oh, okay. Let's go to the other Martin Puryear slides, which are a little bit lower down. Great. So we installed this project in all of its parts on the oval lawn, and Martin talked about 40 feet high ultimately, and this work achieved colossal scale and was really an example of a sculpture that elicited great and profound interpretations about politics, identity, democracy, because with a chain link fence wraparound, people could not access these stories, these layers. So there was significant meaning in that work. This was industrially produced in a factory in upstate New York.
How?
Yes.
I was wondering, I mean, aren't most of these works are accessible? I mean, you just walk right up to them. Isn't that correct, Brooke?
That is correct. Yes.
I didn't remember that that this was inaccessible in some ways. I thought we could actually go up to it. In fact, I have a memory of going up to it, but
yes,
I could be wrong. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Yeah.
Yes.
It's huge, isn't it?
That's huge. So after New York City, after Madison Square Park, the project traveled to the Association for Public Art in Philadelphia, to a park space on Kelly Drive in Philadelphia, where it had really an altogether different, no less magnificent presence, but there. And then the work now, as many of you know and have seen, is on view at Mass MoCA, next slide, in North Adams. We knew that these materials are temporary. The factory with whom we worked projected that this will last for a generation. So far, it is weathering beautifully in North Adams, so we'll see. We hope it continues for more than one generation.
Yeah.
We were also fortunate and honored to work with Martin at the for his role as the United States artist at the US Pavilion at the 2019 Venice Biennale. These are examples of the works that were on view there for his exhibition, Martin Puryear, Liberta. Next one, thanks. Abigail DeVille was perhaps, her project was perhaps the quickest ever that we have constructed in the history of the 20-year art program. This was on view and commissioned in June of 2020, and it opened in October 2020. And Abigail was, that's during the pandemic. Abigail was inspired by these images of the Statue of Liberty, especially on the right with the arm and torch of the statue that were in Madison Square Park between 1876 and 1882. The project was called, next slide, Light of Freedom. And Abigail created an armature for the work to resemble the torch. Next one. We installed everyone wearing masks in the park. There was a golden scaffolding around the work. Next one, please. And she filled the flame with mannequin arms, really beseeching people. This was created during a time of turmoil in our country with the presidential election, Black Lives Matter movement, politics, very intentionally realized by Abigail to call out issues around freedom and democracy and struggle. Maya Lin, we worked with in 2021. Her ghost forest was Maya's a temporary project, also unusual for Maya Lin in her practice. We went to the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, and we were introduced to a site there that was a site of regeneration for desiccated trees that had succumbed to climate change and saltwater intrusion. Maya chose 49 of those trees. We brought them to Madison Square Park. They were absolutely towering at around 40 feet high each. Next slide. And we installed these. We brought them to the park in the nighttime, and then they were strewn across the oval lawn. And then Maya created Ghost Forest, a piece that really combined her agency as an artist with her work as an activist on the environment. Most recently, Shazia Sikander's piece called Witness was a co-commission between Madison Square Park and the University of Houston. When the project was on view in Madison Square Park, it was absolutely embraced by the public and specifically women, because Shazia's work spoke to ideas around women and justice. This sculpture on the left is Witness, and you can see on the right how people gathered and took photographs pretty regularly. Controversy ensued around this work. It says 2013, that should be 2023. That's a typo on the left. Controversy ensued when the work traveled to Houston and was installed on the campus there. Almost immediately when the work was installed, but before the exhibition opened, there was there were protests by small groups calling the work satanic and demonic. When Hurricane Beryl came to Houston last July, and there was no security on campus stationed around Witness, Shazia's work succumbed to vandalism when an individual climbed up the hoop skirt with a sledgehammer and whacked off the figure's head. This was a harrowing, horrible experience for so many people to see that, to witness what had happened to Witness. Shazia wrote an op-ed piece for the Washington Post that talked about how her sculpture was beheaded decapitated, but in fact, she was not planning to fix this work. She wants it to stay on view as a testament to the trauma that the work has received.
So the question also that this brings up
Yes.
is, has Madison Square Park experienced this kind of vandalism? And perhaps you can comment on that. And then what does one do about it? Just
right. So 60,000 people a day. That's a lot of people. Overall, the works are there and seen with great respect, and we have not had extensive damage to the projects. There have been, on occasion, Sharpie markers on the work or keying on occasion. Hugh Hayden's project, Briar Patch, actually, he had hoped, because it was wooden school desks, he had hoped that people would graffiti the work, would put marks on the work, would chew gum and stick them under the elementary school desks. That didn't happen too much. Overall, the works have not received the type of vandalism that Sikander's project experienced in Houston.
Is perhaps, well, it's perhaps the location, but it's also an interesting thing that we don't have that kind of vandalism so far in a place as public as Madison Square Park. I mean, in a way, it sounds like it is a tribute to our, our people here, but yeah, I mean, but it can always shift, right? So when you select a work, Brooke, how do things like that factor into it?
I should just say too that our neighbors and our community, members of the communities who come to the park, are very involved with the works on view, respectful of the works on view, and interested in those. So that may also be something that there's a sense of protection by the communities who see the commissions. We work very closely and feel that there's a great sense of responsibility to the works of art. There's almost a sacred unwritten contract among the Conservancy, the artists, and the public for making sure that every project is structurally sound and engineered, that it will be on view with exhibition signage to talk about the artist, their work, their intentions, that there are public programs that accompany every exhibition. So all of that is a consideration when we begin a conversation with an artist and ask them to create a proposal for a project in the park.
And speaking of that, when you mentioned that you actually don't know what the final work will be, I find that really wonderful, a great act of faith.
I mean, until something is actually installed on site in that space, you don't know the ultimate project.
Right? And I don't know if you want to go back. It was just when you were talking about Maya and Martin's and Abigail's and Shazia's pieces. I just thought maybe, again, just to get an appreciation of what goes into an actual installation, perhaps you could just talk a little bit about those 49 dead trees that were brought from the Pine Barrens here. I mean, did you say, wow, it went up, it's staying up,
This was a close collaboration among our colleague Tom Reedy, our engineer John Barry from Thornton Tomasetti, Maya and her team. So we all traveled over on several occasions during the pandemic to the Pine Barrens, as I said, where Maya selected those works, those trees that became sculptural objects in the park. She created a model in the studio, and then we did a mock-up of placement in the park in anticipation of the trees trucking from the Pine Barrens to New York City. They came in the nighttime so that they could get over certain bridges with permissions, and they were laid out, the trees were laid out on the ground plane of the park, and then Maya selected which tree would go where. There was a very deep hole that was dug for each of the 49 trees. They were placed in like you would place a flagpole, and then the dirt was refilled. So gravity really held those objects, those sculptures, those trees in place.
And then also perhaps you should tell us what happened to those trees afterwards. I mean, that's always an issue when you talk about environmental art, because sometimes it's not so environmentally sound. But I know that there was a plan in place. So let's reassure our audiences.
The majority of those trees were used, taken by, donated by the artist to an organization in the Bronx called Rocking the Boat, that works with high school students on environmental studies and boat building. So these trees became boats that were sailing ultimately on the Hudson River. And then Maya used sections, the lower register of each tree, in a new sculptural project. So she created new work from those pieces.
So great. Yeah. And also perhaps, Brooke, you might want to mention the sound component that was part of this installation, which I actually found wonderful.
Yes, thanks, Lily. Yeah, Maya made a soundscape of creatures that you can no longer hear in New York City, extinct creatures. So that was absolutely wonderful. We collaborated with the Lenape Center on that, to have their voice also as part of Maya's soundscape. As well, we had a public program. This was Maya's idea, where we planted 1,000 new trees and shrubbery across 5 public parks in New York City. And those were put in by volunteers across several days during the run of the project.
Terrific. And then one other thing, we might note, everyone, that there was a kind of shift starting in 2014, which is about a year after. I don't know exactly when you came in, but from 13 to 14, that the shift was both greater diversity, but also a far greater number of women artists in this space. So is that because, we're finally having women in positions where they get to choose, or what are your comments, Brooke?
When you're making work for an artist, making work in public space, it is significant for a range of artistic voices to be commissioned for a public park. So yes, we reached out to women artists, artists of color, and also to artists whose materials hadn't been tested in public space, to artists who may be creating their first effort in an outdoor setting, all of those things. And that's important for the program to demonstrate the range of contemporary practice, that public art is not only bronze, like Leonardo. This was Leonardo's first public art exhibition outdoors, City in the Grass of 2019. This was an over 100-foot long, sprawling, undulating carpet that he painted. And then several architectural forms rose up from the ground plane. Leonardo hadn't used color extensively in his work before, and this opened him up. This opened up his practice to including more ideas around color and coloration in his ongoing sculpture.
Well, just to throw some numbers, because I think it was with the Guerrilla Girls that I first learned to count. So I did a little counting here, Brooke. And so I think so. Let's see, there have been 13 women, I think, since you became director, and since 2021, 8 out of the 9 artists shown have been women. So, well, for the women in the audience, I think that's a real a gain of sorts. I mean, because we are kind of equalizing out, the numbers of opportunities. So, and you did say that you named some of the ways that you gauged the popular response. I mean, is there anything more formal? I mean, how do you calculate that? How does that affect your future choices?
In the 1990s, Harriet Senni, who was a public arts scholar, did a survey with her graduate students. And they determined that when people walked by a work of outdoor art, outdoor sculpture, that only 5% looked up and spent any time with that work. Okay, this is the 1990s. That is a grim assessment of public engagement with works of art. But I think more recently, into the 2000s, what we're seeing intensively is the great engagement with works of public art, and how that's not something that is quantitative, that I can tell you the percentage. But what I can tell you is that the number of people who post images of art in Madison Square Park on Instagram and other social media is extraordinary. I think that that's a really important gauge. And significantly too, in this era when social media and our computers have an incredible hold on our lives, the fact that people are seeing works of art outdoors and stopping and engaging with them and considering them and talking about them in groups, with neighbors, with communities, that's also a great gauge of how these projects can inspire people, challenge people.
Okay, well, here's another question, and I think this should be of special interest to the artists in the audience. So we all know how to get to Carnegie Hall, right? We practice,
Right.
but how do we get to Madison Square Park if we're an artist? What goes into that?
So our program is curatorially driven. We have a plan, a schedule that's organized 3 to 4 years in advance. And we sit down 3 times a year with our art committee. That includes 3 of our alumni artists and colleagues, writers, supporters, neighbors. And we discuss in great detail the proposals by the artists we've reached out to and consider different aspects of their work, questions of structural integrity, engineering, all of these kind of things. And so we review those intensively in meetings and ongoing conversations with the artist.
So how do you get that pool, Brooke?
Well, if a program it's curatorially driven. So that means that there's a lot of research and looking, going around to different exhibitions and studio visits and reading and looking online. So that's what that involves, as well as the fact that we fundraise for every outdoor exhibition. So our supporters have been extraordinarily generous. Bloomberg Philanthropies, the Henry Luce Foundation, Mellon Foundation, Ford, the Gelman Foundation, Ruth Stanton, and then government organizations, National Endowment for the Arts, NISCA, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, as well as many individuals. All of that goes around creating a work in Madison Square Park. We publish exhibition catalogs. They're all available online and for free. And as I said earlier, public programs accompany every project, and that's really derived from the artist. And if the artist would like to see a dance performance or poetry reading or panel discussions around their works, or many other ideas for public space.
And so then, what had perhaps been the most gratifying for you about being the director of Madison Square Park Conservancy and the curator, especially about a role in the public sector? Do you feel, as we discussed, as a particular responsibility because it is a venue for public art, and in that case also a special gratification when it works?
Sure, the responsibility is demonstrating the range of contemporary practice. We don't just show one type of work. We try to capture over the years many different types of works, different styles, materials, ideas, creativity that go into an artist's studio, and then they bring that out into civic space. In terms of what is gratifying in a curatorial sense, if our program and a commission in this park can inspire an artist forward and stretch their materials and stretch their creativity and imagination and ideas for their work into the future, that's extraordinary. And I think the public comes to engage intensively and urgently with the works on view, and then they come to follow an artist project and practice after their time in the park.
So, I think, well, these spaces, this public art is as an enormous gift to the city. And, and it's one of the things that make New York special. So I thank you and all the people who have worked on this, including the artists, but everyone. And then I think because actually Brooke is in the process of installing right now. So she's going to have to leave us pretty soon. But before we switch to questions, perhaps you could tell us what's upcoming in terms of Madison Square Park right now as they finish off their 20th anniversary year.
Yes. So next Thursday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., we, on the occasion of the 20th anniversary milestone of the program, we're holding our annual symposium and have invited back many of our alumni artists. This will be an epic symposium with wonderful curator moderators, but 21 of the Conservancy's past artists will participate, talking about if a commission in Madison Square Park has advanced their practice and in what ways. Please come. The program is free, October 24th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at SVA Theater.
And Nicole Eisenman is opening on October.
Well, everyone is invited to the opening view of Nicole Eisenman's. I think we have a slide of that. Her project called Fixed Crane, or maybe we don't have a slide of that. Okay. Fixed Crane, that is a 1969 link belt crane that is now at rest, recumbent, impotent, lying across the oval lawn of Madison Square Park, that Nicole has embellished with sculptural objects, as she always does in her painting and her sculpture. The artist creates work that can be tragic and also humorous. And this is an extraordinary piece. It's in a sense, like a Duchamp assisted ready-made. Duchamp used that term first in 1916. This is an actual crane that was once running and building, and now it's at rest on the oval lawn.
well, it's a far cry from the heroes on horseback. So anyway, Magali, if you have questions, please. Thank you, Brooke.
Thanks, Lily.
Thank you so much, Brooke and Lily. That was so insightful. I can't wait to go see Nicole's piece myself. I'm going to kick off the questions by asking, what was the most challenging project that you've worked on, Brooke?
Oh, all of them have different responsibilities and challenges associated with them. We have a really strong team of colleagues and engineer with whom we work closely. I think every exhibition has its own issues that we try to solve.
Has anything ever fallen down, Brooke? I keep asking. I just wonder because they're such enormous, complicated projects. Excuse me.
Thank goodness, to my knowledge, nothing has fallen down, Lily. Unless you count the horrific situation in Houston with Ozzia's sculpture, which was a deliberate decapitation.
Thank you, Brooke, for that answer. And then next, I'm going to pass it over to Chloe, who has a question.
Brooke, I have so many questions for you. My first one is, how do the artists select a site in the park? You've done so many projects across different sections of the park, and I imagine some are more difficult than others. And I'm just curious how that process works and what developing the artist brief looks like with each artist.
Yeah, that's a great question, Chloe. So at the very outset of engagement, the artist comes to the park and meets with me, with our director of art operations, Tom Reedy, our executive director, Holly Light, our director of horticulture and operations, and we really have a walk together around the park and determine where works could go, what would be best for siting, best for sight lines from the public. Are there spaces that a certain piece would not be accommodating? All of those questions come up when we have that initial walkthrough in the park.
Amazing. And my other question is, after having started at Madison Square Park in 2013, I imagine your goals were different then than they are now for the program.
It's important, and what we've started with the 20th anniversary year is to push the program out into other public spaces in New York City. So Rose B. Simpson's exhibition Seed was on view simultaneously in Madison Square Park and Inwood Hill Park. Inwood Hill Park in Upper Manhattan. That's a 196-acre space, very different space than the 6.2 acres in the Flatiron District. And as well, Magda Campos Pons's performance procession began in Harlem Art Park. The first day of the procession was through East Harlem, and then we concluded that day at El Museo del Barrio, and the second day was from Central Park to Madison Square Park.
Amazing. Thank you so much, and congratulations to you and the team on 20 years of this.
Thank you. Thanks, Chloe.
Thank you so much. And I think that was our last question. So thank you, Brooke, and thank you, Lily. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art for sponsoring our NSC program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rail's YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 24 years. A donation directly supports our writers, staff, and operations. Support our work through the link in the chat, and join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Tacita Dean and Amanda Guidisi on the event of Blind Folly at the Mental Collection. And you can now turn on your microphone and say hello and goodbyes, Lily.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you. Take care.